Hey Jacksonville. Today, we're diving into two housing trends that are actively reshaping how people live in this city, not years from now, but right now, one unfolding on the rental side and the other in the affordable housing space. And when you examine them together, they reveal a much bigger story about where Jacksonville is heading and who this city is ultimately being designed for. Because while growth is easy to celebrate in headlines filled with new projects, cranes, and rooftops, the more important question is how people actually live within that growth and what that growth means for everyday families trying to build stability, opportunity, and long-term security. And that's where the real story begins, not in renderings, but in real-life decisions happening at kitchen tables across Duval County. Let me ask you something direct. If you had the opportunity to rent a brand new townhome with updated finishes, energy-efficient systems, no exterior maintenance, your own private entrance, and maybe even a garage, would you choose that over buying in today's market right now? Not 5 years from now, not when rates drop, not when prices adjust, but today. For many Jacksonville residents, that scenario is no longer hypothetical because that option already exists and it's being built intentionally to meet a very specific moment in the market. A Tampa-based builder, Marquis Homes, has officially broken ground on a build-to-rent community called The Preserve at Crystal Springs, located just west of downtown near I-10. And this is not a traditional apartment complex with shared corridors, thin walls, and stacked living. It's a 64-unit community composed entirely of 3- and 4-bedroom townhomes designed specifically for renters who want more space, more privacy, and a layout that genuinely feels like a home rather than an apartment, meaning your own front door, your own driveway, potentially a garage, and the sense of separation that many renters have been missing as multifamily density has increased across the country. And that distinction matters because psychology plays a role in housing decisions just as much as numbers do. This type of product appeals to several groups at once: young families seeking stability but not yet ready to commit to a mortgage in a higher rate environment, professionals relocating to Jacksonville who need flexibility before committing long-term, homeowners who sold at strong equity positions and are waiting for the right time to re-enter the market, retirees downsizing but not ready to buy again, and long-term renters who simply want a higher quality living experience without locking themselves into decades of debt. And that last group is growing faster than most people realize as lifestyle flexibility becomes a greater priority, especially among younger generations who value mobility, liquidity, and optionality. These homes are not being delivered at a bare minimum standard either. They are centered around efficiency and livability, featuring Energy Star appliances, LED lighting, low VOC paint for healthier indoor air, recycled flooring materials, and water-saving plumbing fixtures, all of which translate into lower utility bills, healthier interiors, reduced environmental impact, and more predictable monthly expenses. And in a time when affordability pressure and inflation fatigue are very real, predictability carries serious value because people want to know what their housing costs will look like month after month without unexpected spikes in maintenance, insurance, or HOA surprises. Looking deeper, Marquis Homes operates as the in-house builder for Lafayette Real Estate, a New York-based investment firm with national reach, and their choice of Crystal Springs was strategic rather than random because the site sits near employment corridors like Alliance, Florida, and Westlake Industrial Park, offering proximity to jobs, shorter commutes, and consistent rental demand. And institutional capital evaluates labor trends, population growth, long-term supply projections, absorption rates, and demographic shifts before making investments of this scale, meaning this isn't speculative optimism, but data-driven conviction. According to Lafayette's CEO, Thibault Adrien, as new development starts slow nationally due to higher construction costs and financing constraints, quality supply tightens, and demand begins to concentrate around well-located, professionally managed communities, making build-to-rent communities even more attractive as a long-term asset class. And with plans to build roughly 1,200 homes managed by Brandywine Homes USA, this model is expanding, not slowing, which signals confidence not just in Jacksonville's housing market, but in its employment base and long-term population trajectory. When you zoom out, this rental trend connects directly to a broader shift happening across Jacksonville. In 2025, for the first time on record, residents identified housing affordability, not crime, as the city's top concern, underscoring the intensity of the housing shortage, which totals tens of thousands of units across income bands. And as Affordable Housing Director Joshua Hicks has stated, there is no overnight fix and no single lever that resolves the imbalance, meaning we are not suddenly constructing 50,000 units next year without billions of dollars materializing. And instead, the city has leaned into transparency and strategic planning by launching its first public affordable housing dashboard, allowing residents to track projects, unit counts, geographic distribution, and responsible developers in real time. And when you examine the data, you see meaningful activity already underway rather than empty promises. VestCorp has delivered 345 affordable units with 520 more underway, including Torrey Meadows Apartments and supportive housing at Sulzbacher's Enterprise Village. Cornerlot Development Group completed Avian Apartments and Avery 2 Apartments and is planning additional South Bank development to diversify housing options in a submarket that has historically skewed toward either luxury or limited supply. Avon Construction Group is accelerating supply through adaptive reuse conversions of former hotels in Bay Meadows and the South Side into micro apartments under Elevate Commercial Investment Group ownership. And adaptive reuse matters because it shortens timelines dramatically, allowing the city to add units faster than traditional ground-up construction would allow, and speed matters when supply lags and pressure drives rents higher, stretches buyers beyond comfort levels, increases commuting distances, and slows mobility across the workforce. Growth is citywide rather than isolated, with Arlington adding 240 units and more underway. Out east, delivering over 300 units with additional projects planned, nearly 600 affordable units in the downtown pipeline across the Sports and Entertainment District, North Core, and Cathedral Hill. And in 2025 alone, the city completed 10 projects totaling 1,484 units, including 540 affordable and 300 workforce units, with 26 additional projects underway totaling more than 3,300 units, nearly 2,500 of them affordable, including Westwood Apartments, the Rosa Parks development by Gateway Jacks, and Rise Doro, all shaping the next phase of Jacksonville's housing landscape and creating incremental relief in a market that has felt tight for years. When you compare institutional build-to-rent communities with city-supported affordable housing efforts, you begin to see a structural shift. Jacksonville is not simply adding rooftops, but redefining housing pathways, moving from a simple buy or rent model to a layered system of renting by choice, renting for flexibility, buying later, downsizing strategically, living closer to work, entering workforce housing, occupying adaptive reuse communities, or transitioning between stages of life without necessarily following a single linear ownership trajectory, creating segmentation and flexibility that carry real value in today's economy, particularly for younger generations who prioritize mobility and liquidity, but also for older residents seeking lower maintenance living options. The bigger questions remain and deserve honest conversation. Does build to rent enhance mobility by lowering barriers to entry or normalize long-term renting at the expense of wealth building? Does affordable housing stabilize neighborhoods and prevent displacement or simply narrow widening gaps temporarily? Does flexibility strengthen resilience or delay equity accumulation for families who might otherwise build generational wealth through ownership? The answers will shape Jacksonville's next 2 decades. And while coordinated growth across rental, workforce, and affordable segments could position the city as one of the most adaptable mid-sized markets in the country, supply constraints, insurance volatility, infrastructure limitations, or demand surges could quickly reintroduce pressure and reignite affordability challenges if not carefully managed. From firsthand experience living and working here, conversations are evolving. Buyers are more analytical and cautious about timing and long-term costs. Renters are more strategic about lease terms and location decisions. Developers rely heavily on absorption modeling and capital stack structuring before launching projects. And city leaders emphasize transparency in public dashboards more consistently, signaling thoughtful growth rather than reactive expansion driven purely by speculation. Ultimately, when you consider both sides, build-to-rent communities like the Preserve at Crystal Springs and the broad affordable housing initiatives underway across Arlington, out east, downtown, Bay Meadows, and the South Bank. One conclusion stands out. Jacksonville is redefining what housing means here, where ownership is no longer the only aspiration. Flexibility has entered the equation as a legitimate strategy rather than a fallback. And affordability is now front and center in public conversation rather than an afterthought. And that shift changes how we evaluate projects, how we measure success, and how we define stability in a growing Sunbelt city. So I want your perspective. Would you rent a newly built townhome if buying felt stretched? Would you rent even if you qualified to buy simply for flexibility? Are you already seeing the impact of affordable housing in your area in terms of new neighbors and improved stability? Or does your neighborhood still feel undersupplied and overpriced? Stay engaged in the conversation shaping our city's future, because these numbers represent more than development metrics and policy decisions. They represent families choosing where to raise children, workers deciding how far to commute, retirees determining how to downsize, and entrepreneurs evaluating where opportunity lives. And ultimately, they represent long-term opportunity, mobility, and resilience for Jacksonville as a whole. I'm Luke Christmas, and it's always Christmas when you work with Christmas Homes.